Attraction is often misunderstood. People think it begins with appearance. They think it comes from having the perfect body, the perfect clothes, the perfect words, or some mysterious level of confidence that other people simply seem to possess. But attraction is rarely that simple. What pulls people towards you is the experience they have when they are around you. The fastest way to lose your power around another person is to make their approval more important than your own judgment. The moment you begin measuring your worth through someone else's reactions, you become emotionally dependent on signals you cannot control. A delayed message suddenly feels like rejection. A short reply feels like disrespect. A canceled plan feels like humiliation. A lack of enthusiasm makes you question everything about yourself. You begin adjusting your personality, opinions, appearance, and behavior according to what you think will make the other person approve of you. And without realizing it, you stop being yourself and start performing for acceptance. Real attraction begins when that pattern ends. Emotional independence does not mean becoming cold, arrogant, or indifferent. It means you can genuinely enjoy someone's attention without becoming dependent on it. You can appreciate someone's affection without needing it to feel valuable. You can want someone in your life while knowing you will still be complete if they choose to leave. That internal position changes everything about the way you communicate. When you are desperate for approval, your behavior becomes predictable. You agree too quickly. You laugh at things that aren't funny. You compliment too much. You respond immediately because you are afraid of losing their attention. You avoid expressing disagreement because you believe conflict might make them leave. You constantly monitor their mood and adjust yourself accordingly. The other person may not consciously analyze any of this, but they can feel the imbalance. Now, imagine the opposite. You enter the interaction with curiosity instead of desperation. You aren't thinking, how can I make this person like me? You're thinking, who is this person? And do we actually connect? That question puts you back in control of your own emotional world. You are no longer auditioning for a position in someone's life. You're evaluating whether their presence deserves a position in yours. That mindset creates confidence without requiring you to pretend. You can disagree without becoming defensive. You can say no without feeling guilty. You can walk away from disrespect without delivering a dramatic speech. You can enjoy a conversation without needing it to become a relationship. You can receive rejection without interpreting it as proof that something is wrong with you. This is where many people misunderstand confidence. Confidence isn't walking into a room believing everyone should want you. That's insecurity wearing expensive clothing. Confidence is walking into a room knowing that not everyone will like you, and knowing that you don't need everyone to. You don't need universal approval. In fact, trying to be universally liked often makes you less memorable. If you constantly change yourself to fit whoever is standing in front of you, there is nothing solid for people to connect with. Your personality becomes a reflection of theirs. You become agreeable but forgettable. Stand for something. Have preferences. Have boundaries. Have opinions. Have interests that exist independently of whoever you're attracted to. Build a life that doesn't collapse when someone's attention disappears. And don't confuse independence with playing games. Deliberately ignoring messages, pretending not to care, creating jealousy, or withholding affection to make someone chase you isn't emotional independence. That's still dependence, because your behavior is being controlled by the reaction you want from them. True independence is much quieter. You respond when you genuinely have something to say. You make time when you actually have time. You express interest when you feel it. You leave when something violates your standards. You don't manipulate the other person into proving that they care. You simply observe their behavior and make decisions based on reality. The more comfortable you become with yourself, the less you need to force connection. You stop trying to convince people of your value. You stop over-explaining your choices. You stop chasing people who repeatedly show you that they aren't interested. Your attention becomes intentional instead of desperate, and your presence becomes stronger because you're no longer asking everyone around you to validate your existence. Curiosity is one of the strongest forces in human connection because people naturally want to understand what they cannot immediately explain. When someone seems completely predictable, there is little reason to keep exploring. But when there is depth, contrast, and something left to discover, attention becomes more natural. This does not mean pretending to be mysterious, withholding information, or deliberately confusing someone. It means allowing a relationship to unfold instead of trying to reveal everything about yourself at once. Many people destroy curiosity because they feel pressure to prove themselves immediately. They tell their entire life story during the first conversation. They explain every achievement, every struggle, every opinion, and every detail about their personal life. They want the other person to understand them completely as quickly as possible. But attraction rarely develops through information overload. It develops through discovery. Think about the difference between meeting someone who constantly tries to impress you and meeting someone who is simply comfortable being themselves. The first person may talk endlessly about accomplishments, connections, money, experiences, or status. The second person might reveal pieces of themselves naturally, allowing conversation to move from one subject to another. You gradually discover what they care about, what makes them laugh, what they believe, what they've experienced, and what they want from life. That gradual discovery creates psychological momentum. Curiosity also grows when you ask better questions. Not interrogation questions designed to extract information, but questions that reveal how someone thinks. Instead of asking, "What do you do?" and immediately moving to the next predictable topic, you might ask what they enjoy most about their work. Instead of asking someone where they traveled, ask which place changed the way they see the world. Instead of asking what they like, ask what they could talk about for hours without getting bored. These questions move beneath surface level information and create opportunities for emotional connection. But there is another side to curiosity. You need your own depth. You cannot manufacture mystery when there is nothing underneath it. If your entire personality revolves around appearing unavailable, eventually people discover that there is nothing interesting to discover. Real mystery comes from having a life that contains multiple layers. Develop interests that have nothing to do with attraction. Learn something difficult. Read ideas that challenge you. Develop skills. Pursue goals. Spend time alone. Have experiences. Build friendships. Explore places. Create things. Become passionate about something. When you have a rich internal world, you naturally become more interesting because you have more to bring into conversations. You don't have to manufacture stories. Your life creates them for you. And don't make the mistake of believing that curiosity requires constant unpredictability. You don't need to disappear randomly, change your personality, or behave inconsistently. Those tactics can create anxiety, but anxiety isn't genuine attraction. If someone has to constantly wonder whether you care, that's not healthy mystery. That's emotional uncertainty. Healthy curiosity feels different. It feels like wanting to know more. It feels like remembering something someone said and wanting to hear the rest of the story. It feels like becoming interested in their perspective. It feels like discovering another side of their personality during every interaction. You can create this naturally by not rushing to fill every silence. Let conversations breathe. Don't feel obligated to explain every thought. Allow someone to ask questions. When you tell a story, focus on the meaningful part instead of narrating every detail. When someone reveals something interesting, explore it instead of immediately changing the subject. Most importantly, don't use curiosity as a weapon. Don't deliberately make someone jealous just to see if they care. Don't disappear to make them chase you. Don't create emotional confusion because you've learned that uncertainty can increase attention. Those behaviors may create temporary obsession, but they damage trust. The strongest form of attraction comes from being interesting without being deceptive. You want people to think there is more to this person, not because you're hiding something, but because there genuinely is more to discover. When you stop trying to reveal everything and instead allow connection to develop naturally, every conversation becomes an opportunity for another layer to emerge, another story to unfold, another perspective to explore, and another reason to remain curious about the person standing in front of you. One of the most powerful ways to become attractive is to make people feel genuinely seen. Most people spend conversations thinking about themselves. They are preparing their next response, waiting for an opportunity to tell their own story, or silently judging how they are being perceived. Very few people are actually paying attention to what exists beneath another person's words. When you become someone who listens beyond the surface, people begin to experience something rare around you. The feeling that they don't have to fight for your attention. Being seen is different from being complimented. Compliments can feel good, but genuine attention goes deeper. You notice patterns, you remember details, you recognize changes in someone's mood, you listen to the words they choose and the things they avoid saying. You become interested in their perspective rather than simply waiting for your opportunity to speak. That level of attention creates connection because people naturally gravitate toward environments where they feel understood rather than evaluated. Imagine someone tells you, "I've been thinking about changing careers." A typical response might be, "You should do it. Life is short." It sounds supportive, but it doesn't reveal much interest. A deeper response might be, "What made you start thinking about leaving?" Suddenly, you're giving them an opportunity to explain the emotion behind the statement. Maybe they feel trapped. Maybe they are afraid of failure. Maybe they've wanted to do something different for years. The conversation becomes meaningful because you're not simply responding to information. You're exploring the person behind it. This doesn't mean turning every conversation into an interrogation. The goal isn't to constantly ask questions. The goal is to become genuinely curious. Listen carefully enough that your next response naturally comes from what the other person just revealed. If they tell you about something they're passionate about, stay there for a moment. If they mention a difficult experience, don't immediately compare it to something that happened to you. Give them room to finish their thought. One of the most common mistakes people make is turning every shared experience into a story about themselves. Someone says, "I've been traveling a lot lately," and immediately you respond with your travel story. Someone says they had a difficult week, and you explain how your week was even worse. Someone tells you about an achievement, and you feel compelled to mention one of your own. The conversation becomes a competition for attention. You don't have to compete. Let someone have their moment. There is enormous social power in being able to give attention without demanding it back immediately. When someone realizes that you aren't constantly trying to redirect the conversation toward yourself, they often become more comfortable revealing deeper parts of their personality. But there is an important boundary here. Making people feel seen does not mean studying their weaknesses so you can exploit them. It does not mean collecting personal information to manipulate emotions later. Psychological awareness becomes dangerous when it is separated from respect. The objective should be understanding, not control. You can also make people feel seen by remembering small details. If someone mentioned an important project last week, ask how it went. If they talked about a hobby, remember it. If they told you about a goal, follow up later. These small behaviors communicate something powerful without requiring dramatic words. "I was actually listening." People notice that. And because attention is increasingly scarce, Genuine attention becomes increasingly valuable. Put your phone away when someone is talking to you. Maintain natural eye contact. Don't constantly scan the room. Don't interrupt unnecessarily. Allow pauses. Pay attention to facial expressions and changes in tone. Sometimes what someone doesn't say is as important as what they do say. When you develop this ability, conversations become less about performing and more about discovering. You stop thinking about how impressive you appear and start thinking about what you can understand. Ironically, that shift often makes you more impressive because people experience you as confident enough not to constantly prove yourself. The person who makes others feel seen doesn't need to dominate the room. They don't need the loudest voice or the most entertaining stories. Their influence comes from attention, presence, and genuine curiosity. Because when people feel that you aren't merely looking at them, but actually paying attention to who they are, they become more willing to open up, communicate honestly, and remember the experience of being around you. Presence is one of the most underestimated forms of attraction. You can have an impressive appearance, intelligent things to say, and a confident personality. But if your attention is constantly somewhere else, people will feel it. Real presence means being completely engaged with the moment instead of being trapped inside your own thoughts about how you're being perceived. It is the difference between entering a conversation and actually being inside it. Many people think confidence means talking more, taking control, or appearing dominant. But confidence is often quieter than that. It is the ability to remain comfortable without constantly proving yourself. You don't rush to fill every silence. You don't interrupt because you're afraid you'll lose attention. You don't constantly check whether the other person is impressed. You don't need to perform confidence because you're not desperately searching for approval. When you are present, your attention becomes noticeable. You look at the person when they're speaking. You listen without constantly preparing your next sentence. You notice their tone, expressions, and energy. You respond to what is actually happening rather than following a script in your head. That makes interactions feel more natural because the other person can sense that you are genuinely there. Think about how rare that is. Someone is talking to you while you glance at your phone. Another person is telling a story while you're thinking about what you're going to say next. Someone is sharing something important while you're scanning the room for another opportunity. These behaviors may seem small, but they communicate that the moment isn't important enough to receive your full attention. Now imagine the opposite. Someone puts their phone away. They listen. They don't rush you. Their posture is relaxed. Their attention doesn't constantly wander. When you speak, they seem interested in understanding rather than waiting for their turn. You naturally feel more comfortable around them. That is presence, and presence can be developed. Start by slowing down. People who feel nervous often speak faster, move faster, and respond faster because their body is trying to escape uncertainty. Slow your speech slightly. Take a breath before answering. Let your movements become deliberate. You don't need to act artificially slow. You simply stop allowing nervousness to control your pace. Silence is another important part of presence. Many people fear silence because they interpret it as awkwardness. They immediately start talking, joking, explaining, or asking another question. But silence isn't automatically a problem. Sometimes it gives a conversation room to breathe. If someone finishes speaking, you don't need to answer within half a second. Take a moment, think, then respond. That pause can communicate composure. Presence also means becoming less obsessed with your own internal commentary. Instead of thinking, "Do I look confident?" ask, "What is this person actually saying?" Instead of wondering, "Did that joke work?" focus on the reaction and continue naturally. Instead of monitoring every movement, bring your attention back to the interaction. The more you monitor yourself, the less present you become. This is why trying too hard to appear confident can have the opposite effect. You're watching yourself from the outside, constantly judging your performance. Genuine confidence comes from reducing that self-surveillance and becoming more interested in the world around you. Your body language matters, but it doesn't need to become a collection of tricks. Keep your posture comfortable and open. Avoid constantly fidgeting. Make natural eye contact without staring. Let your facial expressions respond naturally. Don't force a dominant stance or imitate some exaggerated idea of confidence. The goal isn't to look powerful. The goal is to feel grounded. There is also power in emotional steadiness. If someone disagrees with you, you don't immediately become defensive. If they don't laugh at your joke, you don't panic. If there is a moment of awkwardness, you don't collapse into self-consciousness. You remain centered. That stability can make people feel safe around you. And safety creates room for connection. When you stop trying to control every impression and start paying attention to what is actually happening, your conversations become more spontaneous. You notice opportunities to be humorous, thoughtful, curious, or serious because you're responding to the moment rather than following a rehearsed strategy, allowing your confidence to become less about appearing impressive and more about being fully comfortable with yourself in the presence of another person. There is a major difference between being available to everyone and being accessible to the people who genuinely deserve your time. Many people confuse constant availability with kindness. They believe that if they respond immediately, cancel their plans to accommodate someone, always say yes, and remain accessible at every hour, they are demonstrating how much they care. But when you give everyone unlimited access to your time and attention, those things gradually lose their perceived value. And more importantly, you begin losing your own sense of direction. Your time should have structure. That doesn't mean playing games. It doesn't mean intentionally ignoring messages, delaying responses to create anxiety, or pretending to be busy when you're not. Those tactics are forms of manipulation. Healthy boundaries are different because they come from having a life that already matters to you. You have responsibilities. You have goals. You have interests. You have relationships. You have time for yourself. Someone entering your life should add to that structure rather than immediately replacing it. Think about what happens when someone becomes the center of your attention too quickly. You begin checking your phone constantly. You rearrange your schedule around their availability. You abandon hobbies because they want to talk. You cancel plans because they suddenly become free. Eventually, your entire emotional rhythm starts depending on their behavior. That isn't attraction, that's dependency. And dependency creates pressure for both people. A healthier approach is simple. Make time because you genuinely want to, not because you're terrified that saying no will make someone disappear. If you're busy, you're busy. If you already have plans, keep them. If you need time alone, take it. You don't need to apologize for having a life. This also changes the way you experience your own relationships. When you preserve your time, you don't become emotionally consumed by one person. You continue developing yourself. You remain connected to friends, interests, work, learning, and personal goals. You maintain perspective. That perspective is valuable. Because when your entire world revolves around one person, every small change in their behavior feels enormous. A delayed response becomes a crisis. A canceled meeting becomes a personal insult. A change in tone becomes something you analyze for hours. But when your life has multiple sources of meaning, one person's behavior doesn't control your entire emotional state. This is why boundaries can make relationships healthier and more attractive at the same time. You don't need to announce your boundaries dramatically. You demonstrate them through your behavior. If you can't meet tonight, say so. If you don't enjoy something, communicate it. If someone repeatedly disrespects your time, stop rewarding the behavior with unlimited access. If someone expects you to abandon your priorities every time they want attention, recognize that expectation for what it is. Being generous with your time is beautiful when it is voluntary. It becomes unhealthy when it is driven by fear. And there is another important principle. Don't create artificial scarcity when genuine boundaries are enough. You don't need to wait 6 hours to respond just because someone told you that fast replies make you look desperate. You don't need to disappear for a day to make someone wonder where you are. You don't need to manufacture jealousy or uncertainty. If you're free and want to respond, respond. If you're busy, respond later. If you want to see someone, make plans. If you don't want to see them, don't pretend otherwise. Authenticity is more sustainable than strategy. People can eventually feel when your behavior is calculated. Manufactured distance may create temporary curiosity, but it also creates confusion. Real boundaries communicate something much stronger. You have control over your life. You are not waiting around for someone to decide what your day will look like. You are choosing how your time is spent. That doesn't make you cold. It makes your attention intentional, and intentional attention feels different from desperate attention. When you give someone your full focus because you genuinely chose to spend that moment with them, the interaction becomes more meaningful. You're not constantly checking whether they will stay. You're simply present because you decided that their company deserves your time. The goal is not to become difficult to reach. The goal is to become someone whose life has enough structure, purpose, and self-respect that access to you naturally has boundaries, because you understand that your time is not something you use to purchase affection, approval, or attention from another person, but something you invest deliberately in the people, goals, experiences, and relationships that actually deserve a place in your life. The deepest form of attraction begins when you stop trying to convince people of your value and start becoming someone who naturally has value to offer. You can learn communication techniques, improve your appearance, understand psychology, become more confident, and develop better social skills, but none of those things can permanently replace substance. If you want people to be drawn towards you, the strongest strategy is not to become better at getting attention. It is to become better at living a meaningful life. Think about the difference between someone who desperately wants to be noticed and someone who is genuinely absorbed in what they are building. The first person constantly looks outward. They wonder who is watching, who is impressed, who is responding, and who is interested. The second person is focused on a mission, a craft, a goal, or a personal standard. Their attention isn't constantly begging the world to validate them. That creates a different kind of presence. Value begins with competence. Become good at something. Learn skills that require patience. Develop knowledge that cannot be acquired overnight. Build something. Solve problems. Become reliable. When you know that you can handle challenges, your confidence stops depending entirely on social approval. Then build your character. Keep promises to yourself. Do difficult things even when nobody is watching. Develop discipline when motivation disappears. Learn to control your reactions. Become someone who doesn't collapse under criticism or become arrogant under praise. These qualities may not immediately attract attention, but they create the foundation of a person who is difficult to replace. Your standards matter too. If you accept anything from anyone simply because you're afraid of being alone, you're teaching people that access to you requires nothing. Standards don't mean demanding perfection. They mean knowing what behavior you will and will not tolerate. You can be kind without accepting disrespect. You can be understanding without becoming someone's emotional punching bag. You can forgive without repeatedly returning to the same destructive pattern. People notice when someone has standards because standards create definition. A person without boundaries becomes whatever other people expect them to be. A person with boundaries knows who they are. Your life should also contain something beyond relationships. Have goals that excite you. Have interests that make you forget the time. Have projects that challenge you. Have friendships that don't depend on romantic attention. Have moments where you're completely alone and still feel that your life has meaning. This is where genuine scarcity comes from. Not from pretending you're unavailable, from actually having a life that deserves your attention. When someone becomes interested in you, they are entering a world that already exists. They are not becoming the source of your identity. They are becoming part of your journey. That difference is powerful. It also changes the way you handle rejection. If your entire sense of value depends on being chosen, rejection feels like destruction. But when your identity is built on deeper foundations, rejection becomes information rather than a verdict. Someone can decide that you're not right for them without proving that you are worthless. You don't need everyone to recognize your value. You need to recognize it yourself and continue developing it. This doesn't mean believing you're superior to everyone else. Real value doesn't require comparison. You don't need to walk into a room thinking you're better than everyone. You simply know that you have something meaningful to contribute and you're willing to keep improving. There is also a difference between appearing valuable and becoming valuable. You can buy expensive things and still lack discipline. You can speak confidently and still have nothing meaningful to say. You can create an image of success while privately feeling empty. Eventually, the image becomes difficult to maintain. Substance is harder to fake. When your actions match your words, people feel consistency. When your confidence comes from competence, people feel stability. When your kindness isn't an attempt to purchase approval, people feel sincerity. When your boundaries don't disappear because someone attractive enters the room, people feel self-respect. And perhaps the most important principle is this: don't make attraction the purpose of self-improvement. Improve yourself because you want to become stronger, wiser, healthier, more capable, and more fulfilled. Attraction should be a consequence, not the mission. When you build yourself for your own reasons, you stop chasing validation. You stop needing every conversation to lead somewhere. You stop treating attention like proof that you're worthy. You become comfortable being alone because you know your life still has direction. Then something changes. You become less concerned with being chosen and more concerned with choosing wisely. You become less interested in impressing everyone and more interested in connecting with the right people. You become less reactive, less needy, and more grounded. The strongest attraction strategy isn't a manipulation technique or a secret psychological trick. It is becoming someone who respects their own life enough to build it deliberately. Build your mind, build your body, build your skills, build your character, build your standards, build your purpose. Build a life that doesn't require another person to make it meaningful. Because when you become genuinely valuable, you no longer have to chase attention. You become the kind of person whose presence is naturally worth noticing.